I personally very much dislike that comparison of Brexit with a divorce. As somebody who works a lot with couples and also with families, it seems a very strange proposition to make that comparison. But I'm quite prepared to go into that and to check it out, and you will see why we get unstuck with it. If this is like a marriage that is broken down and where a divorce settlement needs to be worked out, then the two parties to that relationship are the United Kingdom and Europe. Now, in that relationship, what has gone wrong? One of the parties has actually not so much come to the end of the road of that relationship and is wanting to start a new relationship or be free, but one of the parties, i.e., let's say the father, the UK, has decided to ask the children whether they are fed up with that relationship. So there has been a vote, and in this particular relationship, there are many children. There are some 60 million children. So, for the sake of our argument, let's reduce those to a mere 60, which is still a lot of children, I have to admit, but let's imagine that. So, out of those 60 children, half weren't given a voice, they weren't given a vote because they didn't qualify. And from the other half, it was more or less half of them that voted to actually remain in that relationship, and the other half that voted not to remain in that relationship. So, bizarrely, this family has now decided to split up because a quarter of the children, just a half a one more than the other bunch, a quarter of the children said, no, we want to get out of this family. It has also become obvious that the quarter of the children had this view based on misinformation they were fed and with no overview of the consequences that it would lead the family to. The fact that this family will now become isolated, the fact that this family had some adoptive children, out of 60 that would be 3, so 3 million, 3 children are adoptive children from a previous marriage, say, of the mother, Europe, and those 3 children were not given a voice. If they had been given a vote, of course, the vote in the family would have gone the other way. But they weren't given a voice because they were considered only to be adoptive children and therefore not really belonging to the family. That in itself is scandalous. How can any family make such a huge decision for its future without consulting all those who are concerned by that decision? So, those 3 people are now being treated as if they have no more say about anything, and if they may be asked to leave the home altogether, which is fantastically bizarre in any kind of divorce settlement that just would not happen. So clearly, to use this metaphor of the split between the UK and the EU being like a divorce settlement is incredibly negative for the UK. When you see that through and you think it through, you realize the absurdity of the situation you're in. So this is why I don't think it is a very good metaphor, but I'm very happy to work with it because it does illustrate what has gone wrong. Because if I were a therapist intervening in this relationship between the UK and the EU, the first and obvious question I would ask is, do you actually want to bring this relationship to an end? Or do you just feel that because you asked your children and they misunderstood the situation and therefore a quarter of them said, yeah, we probably should leave, you're now going to ruin your family? Is this really what you wanted? Or has this consultation with the children been a little bit, you know, ill thought through and has gone wrong on you? Well, of course, when you do an intervention with a couple that is thinking of splitting their family in this way, you will ask these questions. You will look at the future. You will ask them very carefully why they wanted to leave and whether or not that is borne out by what they're seeing now, that they've looked into it a little bit further. You don't say, oh, a quarter of your children voted, so now you must carry on with it. No, of course not. You have to keep the family, the whole family at heart. You have to look at the future for all concerned, and therefore you would spend a lot of time thinking about that. And this is exactly what we need to ask our government to do, to think about the whole country and all of its children, also the adoptive ones, and to come up with a sensible conclusion about the desirability of this decision to go, and how idiotic it really is to keep on thinking that is the democratic process, because by no stretch of the imagination is that the democratic process. It was a very ill-informed process where the people, the children of the family, had really no idea what they were doing, and the parents should have known better and should have had long discussions before they would ever pull the children into that decision making at all. And if they ever did so, it should have been done in a very clear way in terms of consequences and in terms of the future and in terms of how that decision would be taken. In other words, what the percentage of the family should be to agree on such a big decision before anything was done, rather than doing it so haphazardly and without mature thought.